Welcome back. This is episode 42 of the MedEdit podcast, your go-to resource for evidence-based medical education.
And the only podcast where two board-certified physicians break down health myths, explore science-backed strategies, and bring you the answers you actually need.
In today's episode, we are diving into one of the most underrated pillars of health, sleep. Whether you're a full-time working parent running on fumes, like us, or a student surviving off of caffeine and 4 hours of rest, this episode is for you.
We are covering it all, from how to actually sleep better to myths about melatonin and naps and what the research says about sleep and chronic disease. Plus, we share our favorite resources, tech tools, and lifestyle tweaks to help you finally wake up feeling rested.
Toss endless online searching to the curb. Let us edit out the noise and bring you medicine without misinformation. Welcome to the MedEdit podcast. Let's start with why sleep matters. So according to the CDC, adults who consistently get fewer than 7 hours of sleep per night are significantly more likely to report 10 or more chronic health conditions, including things like obesity, diabetes, depression, and heart disease.
Yeah, and it's not just about physical health. I actually found this fascinating when I learned about this, that sleep impacts your memory, attention, decision making, and even emotional regulation. The NIH has actually reported that sleep deficiency can impair the same way as being legally intoxicated, which I think is crazy.
Really is. So what is sleep? So we'll just start out there. In fancy doctor talk, sleep is a naturally recurring state of reduced physical activity and perceptual awareness. So it's categorized by distinct stages, including, you may have heard of things like non-rapid eye movement sleep, which has a few stages. There's stage 1 of light sleep, 2 of intermediate sleep, and 3 of deep sleep. And then there's rapid eye movement sleep. These stages cycle throughout the night, with deep sleep occurring during that non-REM stage 3 and dreaming primarily during that REM sleep. So why does that matter? It matters because deep sleep is where the body truly recovers. This is where your heart rate and breathing slows. Achieving the right amount of deep sleep can lead to feeling more refreshed and energized when you wake up, according to all the Mayo Clinic studies, who are the experts in sleep, actually. Adults should aim to get about 13 to 23% of their total sleep time in that deep sleep, which is roughly 1 to 2 hours of deep sleep during an 8-hour night. This is when sleep tracking devices like Oura Rings or Apple Watches, or I'm not sure, does your Whoop do that too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like a Whoop as well. These can be useful. Deep sleep is crucial for physical restoration, tissue repair, and even immune system strengthening. So those apps and devices are useful in trying to see if they can help you recognize how much deep sleep or times in these sleep stages you're getting.
Absolutely. I definitely know when I got mine, it was eye-opening to which of those stages and how much time I spent in each one. And sometimes I got more than I felt like I did, and sometimes a lot less than I needed. So, one of the common myths here, though, is that you can train your body to need less sleep. And that's really false. Your brain and your body requires adequate sleep for essential functions, and chronic sleep debt will eventually catch up to you. Patients always want to know how much sleep is enough. And that's really kind of more of a complex question than you might assume. The real truth is the daily recommendation hours of sleep changes as you age. So it's very important to understand where your sleep requirements fall. For example, in newborn, their sleep recommendation is 14 to 17 hours daily. When they're infants from about 4 to 12 months, this changes to about 12 to 16 hours. As a toddler, you decrease to about 11 to 14. When we start getting to those preschool ages, that range is anywhere from 10 to 13. And then once they're in school, about 9 to 12. Teenagers, even though they seem to sleep a lot more than that, actually need about 8 to 10 hours. Adults, when we're talking about, are 18 and up to about maybe 60-ish, because things do change again after that. We're talking about that minimum 7 hours of sleep, okay? And once you get over 60, there's still that minimum of 7 hours of sleep, but it's still really, I feel like, functioning on much less, really, is what you see. That's a very common thing we see as people get older, is they kind of wake earlier and do actually sleep less.
Absolutely. It's understandable to understand what those healthy numbers are too, because we do have people that says, I only need 5 hours of sleep and I'm fine. Well, you really don't. You're not for true cognitive processing and being at the healthiest your brain can be. That eventually can catch up with you. And I do know people that feel like they need more. So when we're saying a minimum of 7, there are people like, I don't feel well rested unless I have a minimum of 8, truly. So trying to figure out what your number is important too, but that minimum of a 7 hours should be just the base there. But what about another myth? Can't sleep, just pop a pill. So we are going to take a deep dive into the over-the-counter sleep aids that are available. The first one up would be melatonin. So melatonin is actually a hormone in your body that plays a role in sleep. The production and release of melatonin in your brain is connected to the time of day, increasing when it's dark and decreasing when it's light. Melatonin production actually declines with age, which also correlates to sometimes why, as we age, we have more difficulty with sleep. Melatonin is also available as a supplement over the counter, typically as an oral tablet or a capsule. Most melatonin supplements are made in a lab. So this isn't natural, guys. This is made in a lab. People commonly use melatonin for sleep disorders such as insomnia and jet lag. So let's break down the actual research because we hear about this quite often. I have patients come in all the time talking about using melatonin, and some say it works great, some say it doesn't, and they're all using it for all different purposes. But the research actually shows very specific uses and how it can be helpful or beneficial. So for something called a circadian rhythm sleep disorder in the blind, so people that are without sight and cannot see, melatonin has actually been studied the most to help them improve this disorder and help them with sleep in both adults and children with this. If you are blind and have that circadian rhythm sleep disorder, you're not actually able to process the shifts in the daylight around you. And so that can actually throw your brain part, the very primal part of your brain, throws it off balance. And so using melatonin can help it sync and play and understand maybe what would be the natural light and dark phases. People who have delayed sleep wake phase sleep disorder, this is actually a very specific sleep disorder. In this disorder, your sleep pattern is delayed 2 hours or more from what a conventional sleep pattern looks like. We were talking about the sleep patterns before, and it causes you to go to sleep later and wake up later. Research shows that melatonin reduces the length of time needed to fall asleep and advances the start of sleep in adults and children with this condition. So again, we said children twice now about melatonin. You really need to make sure you talk to your doctor before giving melatonin to a child. It is important to talk to your pediatrician. The biggest one people often use it for melatonin is insomnia, just difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. And research suggests that melatonin might slightly reduce the time it takes to fall asleep, but its effects on sleep quality and total sleep time are actually not very clear. Melatonin might be more beneficial for older adults who could be in a melatonin deficiency just with that age-related changes over time. Jet lag actually has a lot of good evidence with it, though. So let's say you just got your travel back from your wonderful trip to Greece or somewhere super fun. You come back and you've got horrible jet lag. Well, melatonin is a great option to use to help with jet lag symptoms, and it can actually help with your alertness and daytime sleepiness when used to help you sleep. Shift work disorder. So this happens a lot with a lot of my patients who are nurses, doctors, people with a lot of those shift where they're working, nighttime and not the daytime. They're trying to sleep during the day. We aren't really sure if melatonin really can improve daytime sleep that way for quality and duration. It seems like it's worth a try, but it hasn't been shown to really make that quality of sleep a whole lot better. And then there's specific sleep disorders in children. Small studies have suggested melatonin might be helpful in treating some sleep disturbances in children who have some disabilities. So, however, good bedtime habits are actually usually recommended as an initial treatment for anybody, any child. And so definitely, again, talk to your child's doctor before giving melatonin to them. Another one that I found really interesting was that research has been also suggesting that melatonin might reduce evening confusion and restlessness in people with Alzheimer's disease. But it doesn't actually seem to improve their cognition. So don't use it as part of,
Right.
helping them remember memory, but just that, almost like that sundowning effect, that confusion and restlessness. So what's the bottom line about melatonin? Your body likely produces enough melatonin for its general needs for most of your life. However, evidence suggests that melatonin supplements can promote sleep. They're relatively safe for short-term use. Melatonin can be used to treat delayed sleep phase and then circadian rhythm to sleep disorders in the blind, like we talked about, and provide maybe some insomnia relief. Treat melatonin as you would any sleeping pill and use it under a doctor's supervision. Just because it's over the counter doesn't mean that it's completely safe. We want to touch on some side effects about it. So side effects and drug interactions do exist with melatonin. Melatonin taken orally in appropriate amounts is usually safe, but it can cause things like headache, dizziness, nausea, of course, drowsiness. I mean, that's kind of the intended effect. But even during the daytime, that like hangover experience can happen too. Vivid dreams are also pretty common in it. But less common melatonin side effects people don't really know about and usually are short lasting. But if you use it consistently, I've had patients come in talking about these things. It can cause things like depression symptoms, mild tremors, mild anxiety, abdominal cramping, irritability, again, reduced alertness. But that's usually during the daytime. We're talking about that hangover effect, confusion or disorientation. And because it can cause that daytime drowsiness when you don't really want it to be, you do really need to be careful about not driving or using machinery within 5 hours of taking the supplement. So don't use melatonin if you have an autoimmune disease. It has been shown to have an effect on things like blood sugar, blood pressure, and the immune system. So talk to your doctor about using it as a supplement for sleep first.
Absolutely. And when we talk about some of the other over the counter sleep aids, this can include diphenhydramine, which is a key ingredient in Benadryl, some of the ZzzQuil type marketed products, which I think is so funny because they say sleep on it and it's really the exact same thing.
Mhm.
But, anyways, many of sleep aids will have diphenhydramine in it. And it's a first generation antihistamine because it is often sedating as a side effect. It can be used in short durations for sleep, but should really not be used for chronic insomnia. And you can develop a tolerance to it pretty quickly, and it becomes less effective with frequent use. The other problem with it is that it has a short duration of action. So it can help you fall asleep, but most of the studies will show it doesn't really necessarily help you stay asleep. Most importantly, it can have a lot of unwanted side effects, including dry mouth, ringing in the ears, nausea, problems with balance and coordination, constipation, even causing difficulty with urination. And if you're over 65, you can also see some confusion as well. The other one that you may sometimes hear of is doxylamine, which is the drug used in Unisum, and it's also a sedating antihistamine, and side effects are pretty similar to diphenhydramine.
The other one we also hear quite often in my clinic is magnesium. So magnesium is often used to help promote sleep. Magnesium is a mineral that plays an important role in various body functions, including the balance of the neurotransmitters in our brain, which those are the chemical messengers your body uses to help nerve cells communicate with each other. Magnesium also has a role in the production of melatonin, a natural hormone that helps regulate the body's sleep-wake cycle, like we talked about. Magnesium may help people whose sleep is disrupted due to things like leg cramps or restless leg syndrome. It might help a little bit with that. And so, what to use, how much to use, it actually is very specific on this one. That's why we're bringing it up. So, evidence suggests that 250 to 500 milligrams of magnesium in a single dose orally at bedtime can be most helpful when used to promote sleep. Although most of the evidence supporting magnesium as a sleep aid is for a form called magnesium citrate, that form, specifically the magnesium citrate portion, actually has a potent laxative effect, which could be good for some people. So if you're prone to constipation, okay, great. This might be a helpful thing, help you sleep, help you, have a bowel movement, great. But if that you need something gentler on your GI system, then really we talk about magnesium glycinate is the one you want to be looking for. It is also over the counter as well. And there's also a less expensive form called magnesium oxide, and that could also be a better choice for you as well. So just be forewarned if you listen to this and you're like, oh, I just can't wait to try magnesium. Magnesium citrate could make those bowels move along a little bit. And you have some other options there that if that's not the intended effect you're looking for.
Absolutely. And I can say overall, the just traditional magnesium that's not in that form, people seem to tolerate it pretty well. So I actually haven't seen a lot of diarrhea side effects from the kind of sleep specific formulations that we've seen with magnesium, which I think is good because, like you said, when you're trying to go to bed, last thing you want to do is have to go to the bathroom a few hours later. That kind of defeats the whole purpose.
And there's studies on magnesium for other things like migraines and headaches and things like that too. So magnesium is actually a really interesting one as well. And there are people who have true magnesium deficiencies that are related to other things related to potassium and maybe some medication side effects. So again, magnesium, just because we're making it sound easy over the counter as well, talk to your doctor about it because you don't want to be loading up on some of these things. Or maybe you don't know. I've had a patient who came in and was having really bad stomach cramping and GI effects. And we realized it was actually from the amount of magnesium they were taking for sleep and migraines. So
absolutely
have those conversations with your doctor.
Or you may actually need more. So if you are one of those people who has a true deficit, the amounts that we've just listed may not be sufficient enough for you. So what are some of our key takeaways from using over-the-counter sleep aids? So first of all, never mix alcohol and sleep aids. I think that's very, very important. We see accidental or intentional mixture of these things pretty often in what we do. So we definitely want to emphasize that a lot. Take it one day at a time. Non-prescription sleep aids might be a temporary solution for sleep problems. However, they are not necessarily intended for long-term use. Keep precautions in mind. Diphenhydramine and doxylamine aren't recommended for people who have certain health problems, including if you have closed angle glaucoma, so that's an eye-related disease, peptic ulcer, and urinary retention. In addition, sleep aids pose risk for women who are pregnant or breastfeeding, and they may pose a risk for people who are over 65 if they're at risk for dementia. So definitely talk to your doctor about what options they recommend.
There, of course, are prescription sleep aids available, and that's a whole topic for another day, another episode. So we're just going to leave it with over the counter sleep aids for now. And we'll touch base on those prescription ones probably in maybe a part 2 of sleep some point.
Yep. So, what about some non pharmacological tools for better sleep that actually work? So, here's a few evidence based tools for better sleep. One is CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. This is kind of the gold standard. And there is actually a free app called CBT-I Coach. And so you can check that out and see. It's got some really great things for people to do kind of that are non-medication related. Sleep hygiene is extremely important. I'd say majority of what at least I've talked to patients about, I feel like we can identify something sleep hygiene related that is a great first step. And that's what I'm talking about, like consistent wake times and sleep times, using that cool, dark room and screen free. I think that's huge. When you're sleeping and scrolling on your phone in bed, I mean, we have studies that show that it's going to make it even harder for you to go to sleep. So you got to put all those screens away. Avoiding caffeine, alcohol, and late night meals. A lot of people claim that alcohol makes them sleep, but we do actually have evidence that it may help you fall asleep, but actually leads to poor sleep quality as well as more frequent awakening during the night. And I mentioned before, but I'm going to say it again because it's important, avoiding screen time at least an hour prior to bedtime. Everybody listening to this has probably gone into the black hole of scrolling through something, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, or even their TV, and basically looked at the clock and it's an hour later and they didn't even realize it. Okay. So you definitely need to put those screens up. If you do want to do something before bed, reading a paper book could be a great alternative. Maybe listening to some, calming music that doesn't necessarily activate part of your brain that's triggered from lights on the screen. Definitely do not disturb function on your phone, and placing it out of sight I think is super important. I did not realize how important that sleep function was on my phone until I started using it. Of course, when I'm on call, I don't get that option, and I definitely notice the difference in my phone alerts and screen waking me up. Naps in general can sometimes be necessary or, great to get you where you need to if you are somewhat of a sleep deficit. But you kind of wanted to, keep them less than 30 minutes. Because otherwise, I don't know if we're going to talk about this anymore, but it's more of like, it's almost like a sleep hangover, like we talked about. And then it can kind of delay that sleep time that Jessica mentioned as far as for how important it is to keeping that schedule. And you really want to avoid doing it after 3 p.m. for that same reason. You can kind of get into a vicious cycle. I guess what I'm trying to say, where you kind of need it and then you rely on it, and then your whole overnight sleep schedule is out of whack. White noise is great, even though I think there's now some evidence of like brown noise and some other ones. Pink noise. Yeah. There's all these noises, but basically just
pick your favorite.
Something in that spectrum of white noise to help fall asleep. And I think in general just kind of helps like knock out some of that surrounding noise that many of us have, whether, where you live. It could be a lawnmower. It could be beeping somewhere in your house. And it just kind of helps, eliminate all of that without stimulating your brain. And guided meditation. There's a lot of apps that help with that now. Some that are free, some that are not. But if you need that, having some headphones on that you can do that, which guides you through some meditation beforehand, helps kind of keep you calm, keeps your mind calm, and help you fall asleep.
So I've personally struggled with insomnia off and on since about college, and I've tried probably just about everything to get some good sleep. So one technique that I've started counseling my patients on, which I find really interesting and has been in the media the last year or so, is something called cognitive shuffling. So cognitive shuffling is a mental technique used to help people fall asleep by distracting the mind from stressful thoughts and inducing a state of random, nonlinear thinking. It involves choosing a random, neutral word and then generating words starting with each letter of the chosen word, focusing on visualization and moving to the next letter when ready. So that sounds a little complicated. I'm going to walk you through it. So for example, personally for me, I always use the same word. I use the word rest, R-E-S-T. So I start with the letter R, and I think of all the random words I possibly can that start with the letter R. I say each word clearly and calmly in my head while also trying to visualize the object or concept it represents, like robot, rabbit, race, rebel. Just keep going. It's a stream of consciousness. No word is kind of what starts with R is off limits. So just keep going with it. Whatever pops in your head, go. You can't say, oh no, wait, that's not the word I'm looking for. No, you do. You just keep going with every R word you can. You just keep going with these R words until your brain absolutely cannot think of another word that starts with R. I usually say if it takes longer than 5 seconds to think of the next word, then move on to the next letter. So then the next letter would be E. You calmly think of words starting with the letter E now. Elephant, eggplant, engage, equate, Eager. They don't all have to be nouns. They can be verbs, they can be adjectives, whatever word pops in your head. So you go through this process until you either one, fall asleep, or two, use all the letters in the word rest. This simple technique is actually well studied and very powerfully effective. So, why does it work? By focusing on the random word and its associated images, you distract your mind from stressful or anxious thoughts that might be keeping you awake. Cognitive shuffling mimics natural sleep onset. As most people naturally drift off to sleep, their minds often wander through random thoughts and images. This is normal. This technique that we're using with the cognitive shuffling engages the brain without overstimulation. It encourages enough to keep your mind occupied, but not so interesting that it actually keeps you awake. So, cognitive shuffling is often used as part of the cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia that Cari mentioned before.
So it's kind of like the modern day counting sheep.
It is. And so that's why,
science-based.
yes, it's a science-based counting sheep, because I tell patients all the time, counting sheep, to be honest, is a little bit too easy.
Yeah.
And you honestly it won't keep you engaged enough. You're just kind of like 1, 2, 3. And then you're like, oh, that ceiling fan's making me annoyed, right? Like, or something like that. It just gets you distracted. This requires just enough effort and attention that it keeps you engaged. And I think that's the clue there, is you're engaged, but you're also not sitting there like stressing about it. And the random thoughts, think about it. If you do fall asleep and fall asleep easily, think about the last time you fell asleep easily. Can you remember possibly maybe having a couple of random thoughts right before bedtime?
Sure.
That's what it's trying to mimic. And that mimicking of it is extremely powerful. And your brain is very good at following that pattern because it knows that's what it naturally wants to happen. And some of us may have a little bit higher anxiety levels, sit there and get in bed and start replaying our entire day or entire week, or thinking about what's the to-do list for tomorrow. And so I personally really need that. I need that ability to disengage. And so I have found the guided meditation to be very helpful. I have found the white noise to be very helpful, especially after I had kids and I was used to the sound machines with the kids. And then I found the cognitive shuffling to be extremely helpful. Most of the time, I can't make it past the letter E, to be honest. So I very rarely will get all the way through to REST.
And that is one good thing about our cell phones, is a lot of these things can travel with us. So if you are traveling, you're on vacation, I definitely have found the white noise when we are on vacation with the kids especially is key. Because you said sometimes they're wanting to sleep at times that are not their normal times, and it just really kind of helps to knock that out. And now we have apps that we can travel with. I remember before that was a big thing. I used to travel with like my white noise machine.
Yes.
Because you had to take it with you. And now it's like you can have everything you need on your phone, whether it's your meditation app, whether it's your white noise, and all of that makes a huge difference. Our kids are definitely much more spoiled than we were in that regard. Some other things to consider about sleep, if you're getting up to urinate in the night more than once, this can definitely significantly alter your body's ability to obtain quality sleep. So you definitely want to talk to your doctor about nighttime urination and not just assume that this is normal. This could be for some people, but you don't want to miss something that is actually a problem. If you have restless leg syndrome, like talked about before, which is a condition where a person feels an intense, irresistible urge to move their legs accompanied by uncomfortable sensations, there are specific pharmacologic and non-pharmacologic treatments available, and again should be discussed with your doctor, and that may be some place where something like that magnesium might be of help for you as well. If you snore, if you've ever found yourself waking up from sleep gasping for air, or maybe your bed partner has told you that you seem to pause for breathing for a few seconds, that's not normal, okay? That could be obstructive sleep apnea, and that's actually a very common condition that is often underdiagnosed and definitely will affect your sleep quality as well.
If you're still struggling after trying these strategies, it might be time to talk to your doctor or a sleep specialist. Sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, and anxiety-related insomnia are all treatable in multiple ways.
Just so we review some of the favorite resources that we kind of touched on earlier, one being the CBT-I Coach app, which interestingly was created by the VA and the DoD. The Sleep Foundation at sleepfoundation.org has a lot of great resources. Some of the guided meditations can include Headspace or Insight Timer. There's a good book by Dr. Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep. And then, of course, as just mentioned, there are sleep clinics, that could be associated with, a center like Mayo or Cleveland, or there could be one locally that your doctor could recommend for you.
Yeah. Some quick stats to remember as well. So 1 in 3 adults in the United States do not get enough sleep on a regular basis. Sleep deficiency is linked to increased risk of Alzheimer's disease, stroke, and early mortality. Just one night of poor sleep can impair your ability to learn and retain new information. So it's really important that we do focus on sleep as part of our overall health.
Absolutely. And that's, especially for you college age students out there too, those all-nighters do not help you do any better on your test. So we're just telling you
No.
right now, anything you think you may have retained right before the test, you will probably lose just from sleep deprivation. And so I
That's
definitely want to
accurate.
put that out. Med students as well, we're notorious for that also. So just make sure that sleep is probably going to do you more good than
Mhm.
cramming for a test.
Absolutely. So we're going to switch focuses really fast here, and we wanted to do a segment touching on something that's been in the news recently. So many of us heard about the recent tragic story of a 61-year-old Long Island man who died after an accident at an MRI facility. And so this one was sent in by some listeners asking, how in the world did this happen?
Right.
How did this man die from an MRI machine? Do you really get sucked into the machine?
Right.
So we're here to break that down.
Yeah. And just kind of as a background, in case you didn't hear all about the story, and some of those reports are still coming in. So I'm not saying that we have all the information, but per the reports that have been published, the man's wife was actually the one undergoing an MRI, but she was having difficulty getting up out of the machine after the MRI and kind of called out for her husband to assist her. He was led in the room where the MRI machine was. And it's unclear if it was not visible at the time or he was just not told, but he was wearing a 20-pound chain around his neck that is used for weight training.
20 pounds.
20 pounds, yes. And I had to Google a picture of this, but
Okay.
yes, 20 pounds. And once he got close enough to the machine, it was magnetically attracted to the MRI magnet. And per reports, he was stuck to the machine for an extended period of time and was later pronounced dead. And was thought to be related to a heart attack, could be secondary to strangulation potentially because it was on his neck and it held him in a certain position for so long. But like I said, there are some unknowns, but we really just wanted to review more of some of the concerns that have arisen from patients about getting an MRI.
Yes. And obviously, I mean, I order MRIs all the time and you do as well. And so we have a lot of patients that already are anxious about getting an MRI because they're worried about claustrophobia and how long it's going to take and just the process. And so this in the news did not help with that. No. I got a few phone calls this week that were like, I have an MRI scheduled next week. Can you help me out? So we just want to kind of touch base. Obviously, we're very sorry for this family and their loss. This is obviously a very tragic situation, but that's why we bring it up, is so that we could probably get some fact-based information so that if you were to have to get an MRI again or your loved one, you're not terrified that something like this could happen to them. So for some background, an MRI machine contains a super strong magnet. 30 to 60,000 times stronger than the Earth's magnetic field, or 200 times stronger than your refrigerator magnet that does not turn off. This allows objects that are attracted to magnets, like tools, oxygen tanks, certain implants, to be attracted to it so forcibly that they can become projectiles. So that's why it's imperative to always screen for metallic implants, devices, or fragments before you get one. They ask you those questions, be honest with them. And if you're not sure, you need to let them know. So things like pacemakers, aneurysm clips, there's a lot of stuff that we have to talk to about it. I'll be honest, I'll throw this out there as a funny story. I went in for an MRI and forgot that I had my bracelets on, and like the ones that don't come off. And so, we had to sit there and be like, okay, do we need to go get a screwdriver and all sorts of stuff? Very interestingly, because they're made of gold, I was able to get in the MRI machine. It was actually really interesting. The science behind it was neat, but really need to make sure you think about those things. If you have jewelry, it needs to be able to come off before you get in.
Absolutely. And, Jessica mentioned one of the things that a lot of the reports had mentioned being sucked into the machine. That's not really what happens. It does not create a black hole that sucks you into it. It's that magnetic attraction that basically is going to make whatever is attracted stick to the magnet. So it's more of, it will pull because it's pulling towards the magnet, but it is not a sucking force that puts you into the machine.
Yes.
And thankfully, overall, these type of incidents are pretty rare. I mean, over 40 million MRIs are completed a year, and we only get a handful of these type of reports. So it tells you overall that it is very safe. And thankfully, fatalities related to MRI machines are even more rare. And they're not unheard of necessarily, but they are very rare. A kind of famous one that came to light, as a lot of people remember it after this incident occurred, was one in 2001, where a 6-year-old boy accidentally was unfortunately killed because he was struck in the head by an oxygen tank that was magnetically pulled towards the MRI machine. But like I mentioned, those are rare occurrences, and following protocols really should not be something that happens.
Yeah. So another question, that our listeners have asked us about this specific situation, and we've touched on already before, was the jewelry part of it, right? I mentioned about like bracelets, jewelry that usually doesn't come off, things like that. But yes, you should leave all jewelry at home when getting an MRI. You really need to think about that ahead of time. If it can come off, it needs to come off, because there's a chance your MRI is getting canceled 100% if they cannot get it off. The victim in this case, unfortunately, was wearing not just a regular necklace either. So, like with my bracelet, if something crazy happened and I accidentally get in there with this bracelet situation, it was attracted. This is a small bracelet. This man was wearing a heavy 20-pound chain necklace that's used for weightlifting, which I'm really not
It's like a bike
sure.
chain. It looks like a chain that you put around a bicycle
Okay.
to secure it. That's kind of what it looks like.
Okay. So he's wearing that around and again on his neck, right? Think about, we always talk about kids and strangulation concerning about anything with their neck. They're really not supposed to be wearing necklaces and things because those kids could get caught. Think about just this is a strangulation effect potentially if something is just pulling on it. So this is not just typical jewelry either. So let's make sure that that's a clarification.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And, one of the questions some people ask is, well, if they're unsafe, why do we do MRIs? And first of all, we don't necessarily think they aren't safe, but I think it's really important to mention that, the interaction that the components in our body have and the radio frequency that's emitted by these magnets creates very detailed, powerful images that sometimes are what physicians need to be able to answer questions about what's going on with people. So we don't order it just because, we could do something else that's safer. And it's important to mention it does all of this without radiation.
If you're scheduled for an MRI, what kind of questions can you expect by the radiology staff to help keep everyone safe, right? Well, they'll ask about implants, devices, or metal fragments, including shrapnel or metalworking injuries that could be in your body prior to surgeries, tattoos, or permanent makeup, which could contain metallic pigments.
Make sure you remove all metal items. We talked about this before. We'll say it again. Jewelry, watches, hearing aids, eyeglasses, your credit cards, dentures. And you also want to let them know and ask about, there are some medication patches that actually have a metallic backing. This can include some nicotine or fentanyl patches.
It's important to remember of all the things we discussed regarding the MRI environment to prevent injury. Only trained personnel should enter the MRI suite. For anyone concerned about getting an MRI, we want to remind listeners that a certified location will have what is called a quench button, which when pressed in an emergency, it rapidly releases the liquid helium that maintains the superconducting state and is just another measure that can be implemented in the rare instance there's an emergency in the MRI suite. MRIs overall are safe, but we need to take those protocols pretty seriously. That is it for this episode of the MedEdit podcast. If you're a clinician, do not forget to check the show notes for your CME instructions.
And as always, thank you for tuning in. Please follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the MedEdit Podcast and send us your ideas for future episodes.
Sweet dreams and better sleep ahead. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the MedEdit Podcast. Please click the follow button to be notified when more episodes become available. For more information about this episode and to find out how you can reach Dr. Cari Sorrell and Dr. Jessica Gray, please visit today's show notes. Be sure to follow us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok to stay up to date on all things the MedEdit Podcast. The information and content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute a physician-patient relationship. If you need medical advice or help, please contact your personal physician. The views and opinions of the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Dr. Jessica Gray or Dr. Cari Sorrell. This podcast should not be considered an alternative to medical advice or diagnosis or confirmation of an illness or disease. Please seek help from your personal care practitioner. Thank you for listening and tune in next time.